call the meeting of the Planning Commission for September 27th, 2017 to order. Could we have a roll call determination of the quorum, please?
Chairperson Sattler.
Present.
Vice Chairperson Borders.
Here.
Commissioner Eswine.
Here.
Commissioner Monroy. Commissioner Salerno.
Here.
Commissioner Stoll.
Here.
Commissioner Tingle. Here. Quorum is present.
Commissioner Tingle, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Public comment. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Planning Commission, including any matters that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. At this time, I'd like to welcome Ms. Maloney, our new transportation manager, is in the audience, and welcome. Thank you. Yeah, come up. Come up and say hello.
Hello. Lucia Maloney, for the record, new transportation manager. I've been here about 6 weeks, and so far the most surprising thing is how hard people in the city work. They get here, if you're here at 7:15, you're the last car in the parking lot, and if you leave before 5, you're one of the first. So it's been a really great experience. We have a good team here, and I'm just pleased to be here, so thanks for having me.
Well, welcome. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other public comment at this time? Okay.
Again, any other public
I
comment?
think there was somebody on.
We're on the agenda, the second item, I don't know.
No, not yet, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For possible action, approval of the minutes from August 30th, 2017. If everyone's had a chance to read them, are there any corrections or changes? If not,
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes of
August 30th.
August 30th.
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any modification of the agenda?
Sorry. I've got a cold. It must be going to my head. Okay. Any disclosures? Any member of the commission may wish to explain any contact with an applicant or the public regarding any item on the agenda or business of the commission. Are there any disclosures? See? Okay. Public hearing matters, F1, SUP 17-116, for possible action to consider a request for a special use permit from 1770 Nichols Lane LLC property owner, 1770 Nichols Lane LLC, to allow an 8-unit apartment building on property zone general commercial located at 1170 Nichols Lane, APN 008-161-11. Ms. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hope Sullivan, Planning Manager. The subject property is 14,375 square feet. The building is proposed to be located on the south side of the property, adjacent to the nursing home, with the parking spaces, on the south side, with the parking spaces on the north side. Adjacent uses to the east is single-family residential, to the west, mobile homes, to the north, mobile home, and to the south, a nursing home. The applicant is proposing an 8-unit, 2-story building, which will be 26 feet 11 inches. All units are proposed to be 2 bedrooms. Residential uses in non-residential zoning districts are subject to, I went to the wrong place, sorry about that. There we go. Are allowed subject to the issuance of a special use permit as well as supplemental findings, 2 supplemental findings from Section Development Standards 1.18. The staff has identified two findings we're a little bit concerned with, and I want to specifically talk to you about the mitigation that the staff's recommending on those 2 findings. The first is the finding concerning the project being detrimental, having a detrimental effect on the vehicular and pedestrian traffic. Thus, Ms. Maloney's joining us today to help us with traffic. Nichols Lane has a right-of-way width of about 20 feet, and it does accommodate two-way travel. Given the substandard width and the increased traffic that would be realized with this project, and to avoid a detrimental effect, the staff has recommended 4 items. 1, the installation of no parking signs. 2, the installation of a 15-mile-per-hour sign. The relocation of the street sign to the curb at Highway 50, and an analysis of the potential improvements of the intersection at Nichols Lane and Highway 50, which that's condition number 9. Staff also is concerned about water flow and specifically fire flow. So when we look at our public services and utilities, staff has identified this concern. The fire flow requirement, the hydrant is 1,500 gallons per minute. To ensure adequate fire flow prior to construction permits, the staff has recommended a study be submitted, prepared by a licensed engineer, demonstrating that the usage from the 8 new apartments will meet the flow requirements. To the extent these flow requirements do not meet the standards, the water main would need to be increased in size and connect to Carmine to loop the systems. There's also in the conditions of approval a recommendation on expanding the size of the sewer line. I believe it was condition number 28. And the staff is recommending some clarifying language, condition number 30, which says the 6-inch sewer in Nichols must be increased to an 8-inch main along the property frontage and all of Nichols Lane south of the project. The condition as written in the staff report ends there, but for clarification, staff is recommending additional language that will say, so as to connect to the 8-inch main located in the Highway 50 right-of-way, because if it doesn't connect, it's not of value. And we just wanted to include that recommendation. So as outlined in the staff report, staff has reviewed the 7 required findings of fact, and with the recommended conditions of approval, we are able to make those findings in the affirmative. We've also reviewed the 4 findings associated with a residential use and non-residential zoning district. To establish a residential use and non-residential zoning district, you must make 2 of those 4 findings. We were able to make 2 of those findings, and with that, the staff is recommending approval subject to the conditions and the modification to condition number 30. The city engineer, Dan Stuckey, is here, as is the traffic manager or transportation manager, Lucia Maloney, and we're happy to answer questions. Peter Beekoff, the applicant, and Keith Schaefer from Manhart are present representing the project.
Just wanted to acknowledge, we did receive a letter from Mr. Nichols that addressed number 28, and I guess we'll be covering that because that's one of the ones you mentioned as well, Hope. Okay. Any questions for staff?
I have a question. Is there any significant difference between this application and the one that was approved in 2016?
The conditions are significantly the same. It's significantly the same project. There's some nuance to the architecture. He switched from, I think, wood to stucco. But in general, the Planning Commission, but you have a lot of new members, but some of you have seen this project 3 times. It's expired. So when you issue a special use permit, they must commence construction within a year or obtain an extension from the Community Development Director, and this did expire.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stoll, you had a question?
I have a few questions
Okay.
for staff or the applicant. I'm just curious, obviously this was approved last year, but why was the thought to site it so close to the nursing home? I think that's unfortunate. Other question is in terms of drainage. I understand that there are drainage problems here and there has been pooling in the street in Nichols Lane. Also, at what point would the city be requiring sidewalks? This is infill development. Obviously, there's new construction. There's a new single-family home being constructed across the street. You have the nursing home there. So at what point is the city going to start requiring, urban standards for Nichols Lane, even though it's substandard? But my main concern is why this complex, the 8 units were sited so close to the nursing home. I think that's unfortunate.
Peter Beekoff with Westridge Homes, representing the client, and our engineer Keith Schaefer is here. The owners are here present also. unfortunately, we came into this project and bought it and went to the county, and the application had not expired, but the 30 days prior notification time had already gone 2 weeks beyond, and we were not able to submit an extension, is one of the reasons we're here today. We have not done anything detrimental besides some architectural changes. We thought the building looked a little prison-like with the gridded windows and the wood siding, so we changed it to stucco and for long-term longevity and maintenance on the project. Other than that, at our major project review, there was some issues brought to our attention from the prior approval that the parking spaces did not meet the county ordinance, even though it was, I guess that would have come out a little bit farther when they got farther, not that it got missed and we were locked into that. So in doing that, backup space between parking spots made us move to meet your ordinance, made us move that building back a little farther. We have made the building, I believe, about 18 inches smaller than it originally was submitted to compensate that, making the units a little bit smaller, but we still had to ask for a less distance on that to the convalescent home. I don't believe there's any accesses from the convalescent home or much windows on that property line. Going off of memory here. So I do have Keith Schaefer here. I don't believe we have from Manhard Engineering to go over a couple questions we have, to more of a clarification. I don't think we have any real problems with staff, and be more than glad to work with the community development and the transportation department and the engineer department. Keith, Manhard's Engineering went out and we did look into the sewer line. We do believe it might be an 8-inch line from their field verifications, but until we actually take a tract out there and pothole that, but we were prepared to increase that line to meet the engineering department. But I'll let Keith come up and go over a few clarifications that he has, just so we're all on the same track, please.
Have you read and accept all the terms and conditions with the changes that have been brought forward?
Yes, we just had some clarifications on, I think, 3 items that we would like to address.
And as far as the windows go, my mother spent some time in that physical therapy, and there's at least 3 patient rooms that go down that south end of the building.
Okay. I was just going off memory. I know there's not, it's a long wall and there's not much there. So, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Keith Schaefer with Manhard Consulting, here supporting the applicant and the applicant's representative. Commissioner Stoll, did you get your questions answered adequately? Did you have a question for staff that you wanted to follow up with on that?
In regards to the drainage first, I mean, I know with this development, there should be no adverse impacts with the current drainage. I mean, that should be all taken care of within the development. As far as, I know there are some capital improvement projects planned down the road on Carmine that I think will help drainage along Nichols, but that's down the road. But as far as related to this development, they will not be adversely impacting or changing, negatively changing the existing drainage. And then I think the other question was regards to sidewalks. My understanding is that the right-of-way width is just too small to accommodate sidewalks. It's a 20-foot right-of-way width along Nichols, and so there's just not room to put sidewalks on this stretch.
And I noticed also from being over there, the whole south side of that, by the nursing home, they parallel they park towards the home, so they back out into the street or whatever when they're there, so.
All right, I wanted to go over a couple of the conditions of approval just for clarification and wording purposes. To answer your question, generally we have read all of the conditions of approval and we agree to them with those that have been added and some of the language that I would like to discuss now, and it's really pretty minor. Condition number 23, where it talks about any existing sewer and water laterals must be abandoned at the city main. We just want to add to that line, serving the subject lot. We are not proposing to change or alter or abandon any other existing sewer or water laterals that might service other properties. That, and one of the conditions that we talked about here, the item number 30, where we may need to upsize the sewer, we have agreed to that. Even though we had talked at one point in time about if we were to conduct a study and show that a 6-inch was adequate and that the existing was adequate, but we agreed with the city, their minimum sewer main size is 8-inch, so we will go ahead and replace that length from the manhole that is close to the Highway 50 intersection of Nichols Lane back to the north boundary line of this subject property. The survey data that I did get from my surveyors, when I looked at their cut sheets the other day, it appeared to me that they measured that those manholes had 8-inch mains in them already, but we're verifying that we're correct. I know that the sitting mapping does show that that's a 6-inch main, so that's where we've gotten our information that that's a 6-inch. I don't know if the added wording is, what's the significance of the added wording on item number 30? Are there two manholes? Is there something going on there that we should know about that you would like to share with us before we agree to that?
I received a telephone call this afternoon asking me if this line would need to connect to the main in the Highway 50 right away. I said, I don't know. Let me double check with the engineering staff. And they said, yes, it does. I said, well, why don't we just say it so everybody's clear? So that's all it is. It's just a clarification.
And that's fine. There's a manhole down there near that intersection of 50 and Nichols, and the next one is up near the north line or somewhere there's another manhole. So that manhole there we will tie into with an 8-inch main and go north up to our property.
And the one at 50 and Nichols, hope is the main line to the main sewer line?
Based on our information, it is. The sewer main runs east and west in 50, and that comes in from the north. I was just wanting to make sure that there wasn't, some, like we got to cut across 50 to get to the main on the south side of 50 before we agree to this. And so I wanted to, it's not worth, but if we're tying into that manhole that's in the Highway 50 right away, that's where we're headed. I wanted to clarify that I thought I heard Hope say that the condition with regard to the fire flow and the water line that is in Nichols Lane right now is a dead-end water line that goes up to about 140 feet from Carmine, which is the next street that runs east and west. Correct. I thought that, just for the record, verbally, this says that we would either upsize the main from 50 to the project with an 8-inch line, or whatever was studied to develop the correct fire flow, or that we would, per this wording, or that we would tie into Carmine, not both. So I just want to make sure that you didn't hear that we were doing an 8-inch line to our property and then in addition to that connecting a line to Carmine. We have conducted that water study. We've worked with the city to develop the fire hydrant flow information all around this property, and both of those options do work. One option would be 700 and something feet of 8-inch line from Highway 50 up to our project does provide the fire flow required, the 1,500 gallons a minute, but leaving that existing 6-inch line in there and connecting the 6-inch line up near Carmine from where it dead ends into Carmine and looping the system also provides that same. And we have an engineered study on that we provided, and we can work with staff.
I believe that's the way it's worded. It says south of the project must be increased in size to an 8-inch main, or the existing main must be looped to Carmine.
That is correct. The way it's worded is correct, but I thought in her narrative she said and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't both. I'm sorry. Maybe I need hearing aids. Sorry, Hope. One other item of interest is, the traffic and the improvements that are being requested out at 50. And we're happy to work with the city and try to design something up that would limit the turning movements to right only onto Highway 50. I know that there has been a subsequent letter written by a neighbor, somebody who lives on Nichols. We're thinking that could be very difficult. Nichols is only 20 feet wide, really the right-of-way at Nichols, and by the time you were to put a rolled curb type of a traffic element in there that would directionalize you onto 50 so you couldn't turn left, I'm not sure the fire department would like us to do that. I think the fire department wants us 20 feet clear, and this then would cause us to grow that entrance down at 50 where I'm not sure we're prepared to do that. So I just really would like to keep some flexibility in there. I don't know, what the meaning, and I don't know how to reword it to say that if the city engineer determines that an access improvement is not feasible, well, sure, it's feasible, just widen the throat there and make the radiuses what they need to be, but there's parking for that center there, and there's another property that lock us into a pretty narrow.
I was going to say, I don't think you've got much more than the 20 feet that's there because it's private property on either side of that, I believe.
Right. So I don't know if we're saying, can we scratch that condition at this level and just not worry about it? Are there other ideas that we might mitigate some perceived traffic problem? Is there a traffic problem? This project doesn't meet the thresholds for a technical traffic study at trips per day or peak hour trips. So we'd be happy to work with them. We just don't want to get into a Pandora's box of saying, well, we think it's feasible if you were to buy some right of way and do this. I just don't want the project to get bogged down in that kind of a.
Maybe Ms. Maloney, would you like to possibly
she's on the
comment or
job.
have a thought on that at this time?
I can start out, and then if she wants to add some stuff, that's great. So obviously, when this project came to be, we were a little concerned about how that interaction with Nichols and 50 would go with the addition of the apartment complex. We've done a lot of, we've done some site visits. We've met with many of the residents out there, and also done some traffic counts. So we've done some work on our end to kind of get a better feel for how traffic's moving through Nichols and some of the concerns there. After collecting that data, which some of it we finished last week, I think we're comfortable. We don't think that this pork chop, restricting the left out movement is really necessary at this point. So I think we would be fine waiving that condition. I don't know if Lucia, if you have anything to add to that, but. Covered it, okay.
Other than that, I don't have any other, I do. And unfortunately, it has to do with the setbacks. I just need to know, there might need to be some flexibility in where we move the building. It's a pretty tight building. But with this SUP application, in the backup information, there's an item in your packet that has setbacks shown, existing or required setbacks by the zoning, which is 0 on the east, west, south, and 30 on the north. With proposed, we think, after doing our detailed survey and resolving the boundary and knowing where everything fits, we might not be exactly at these setbacks. Are we required to meet these proposed setbacks if this, according to with this special use permit, or can we work on that? Is there some way we can work on that?
Hope you want to take that?
If the application for building permit is substantially consistent with this application, you're good to go.
Okay.
So if it's a huge swing and we move our building, we'll have a conversation, but I don't think that's what you're talking about.
So for example, on the west side, if the current setback requirement is 0 and we're proposing 3'6" in this application, but it turns out that with whatever drainage facilities or whatever improvements we do on the street side, we want to push that building another 6 inches closer to that lot, we're okay. Okay. That's the kind of thing I was thinking, where would we be fixed at 3'6", or can we go up to 0?
So the 30 feet required on the north probably is why the building's sitting closer to the nursing home.
That's correct. Yeah, we would have, yeah. Well, that, and it needs a parking lot. The parking lot is required, and the parking lot depths and those kinds of things are, by the time you get 18 and a half feet of parking per in and out and a 26 aisle, your building's pretty limited.
Commissioner Stowell?
Just on the parking, you're required 2 per unit, so you had to do the 16, and then, because there's no on-street parking, you had to do the additional 4. If you had come in to request, I assume it would have been maybe a variance to reduce the parking requirement from, say, the 20 that's required now down to 16, would that have helped in terms of siting this building a little bit further away from the nursing home? I'm just wondering.
I don't think so.
No?
No, I think there are more, no, I think that it's about an even number of parking aisles on the north and the south side of the parking lot.
Thank you.
I don't think that would change.
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, the terms and conditions are the same except number 28 we're not going to have at this point?
According to my notes, number 23 is modified to say any existing sewer and water laterals serving the subject lot must be abandoned by the city. We'll remove number 28, and the applicant's in agreement with the staff's additional wording on number 30, and there are no other changes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, public. State your name, please.
Good evening, Chair and Commission. Maurice White for the record. It's good to visit with you folks again tonight. Boy, a lot to say about this project, to tell you the truth. To start with, in regards to the comment that north wall doesn't have much going on there, there's a window for every room on that wing. There's probably 10 or 12. I've never counted them. Since that building was built in the 60s, but there's at least a dozen windows or 10 on that wall. I am certainly glad to hear that condition 28 has been removed. I appreciate that. That was going to be a pretty major part of my consternation this evening. So let me start with saying I do not oppose development in general, and I am not opposed to an apartment complex on my street. But in my opinion, this project does not meet the criteria for a special use permit, and the paperwork contains false statements and lies. On page 9, paragraph C states that the applicant has provided evidence that this property is not commercially viable. Nowhere in the 56 pages do I find any discussion from the applicant regarding the property not being a viable commercial property. I ask, what evidence has the applicant provided? None of the information I have heard has convinced me this is not a viable commercial property. It might interest you to know that in the past there was a dance school located on this property. That could happen again, I suppose. The convalescent center is in desperate need of improving its parking deficiencies. A parking lot is certainly a viable and seriously needed commercial use in this neighborhood. This is a general commercial zone. Any number of businesses would better fit, like a metal shop, metal fabrication shop, or a medical marijuana dispensary. We have one right across Highway 50 already. How about a pottery factory? That might work pretty well there. It is simply false to say that this property is not a viable commercial location. Also, paragraph C says that this is a dirt road. It is not a dirt road. This is a compacted asphalt grinding surface. On page 11, titled the Special Use Findings, it is my opinion that this project fails 5 of the 7 questions. Question 3 will have little to no detrimental effect on vehicular or pedestrian traffic. Of course, there's detrimental effect if staff feels that a right turn only restriction is needed. Again, I'm glad that that's been removed. The road can't handle the current traffic load. It simply can't. The city rebuilt this road last October. They've repaired it once since, and it is in need of repair again. It can't handle the load now, let alone bringing in additional residences, adding 50% more residences on that street. On page 12, question 4, will not overburden existing public services and facilities. Of course it will overburden the existing services and facilities. Why else would staff require the testing and upgrading of the existing facilities? Conditions 17, 30, and 31 spell out specifically what services and facilities will be overburdened. It is not debatable that Nichols Lane cannot support the current traffic load. On page 12, question 6, will not be detrimental to the health, safety, and convenience. Oh, there's number 28 again. Page 11, question 2, will not be detrimental to the peaceful enjoyment and economic value, and so on. Page 12, question 7, will not result in material damage or prejudice to other property in the vicinity. Considering that the applicant is reluctant to even maintain the weeds, has made false statements that I have pointed out and will continue to point out, there is a high potential for this project to turn into garbage. They are already bad neighbors. Page 4, titled Surrounding Zoning and Land Use. It says that the north property is a mobile home. While it is zoned as a mobile home, that is a site-built house with a basement. On page 21, the second paragraph states, directly across from our project are a few older, in dire need of repaired duplexes. That is a false statement. Directly across the street from this project is an under-construction, new site-built home. The fourth paragraph states that traffic has been reduced significantly on Highway 50. No, it hasn't. And this lie is repeated again on page 29. The fifth paragraph states, the property has been a hangout for local kids. I live on that street. Where I sit to do my work all day long, I look at that lot. That's a straight out lie. And it's repeated again on page 29. Page 27, question 2, the first paragraph states, the lots to the east are residential. They are not. They are a general commercial property. The second paragraph states it will improve the property values because it is a new residential development in an area that needs to be updated with modern development instead of trailers. How dare this Peter Beekoff insult the good citizens of Nichols Lane? 5 of the 9 properties with residences on Nickel Lane are owned by people whose families have been on this street their entire lives. And we're happy with our trailer houses. There is no need to be updated. The constructions of our homes is modern. They are wood construction, substantially similar to this proposal. There are 3 contiguous residences to this property that are site-built homes. So I wonder, what is he talking about? This developer has already shown an adverse attitude to the neighborhood and will not be a good neighbor. Page 29, question 6. Answer 1. The 2 buildings that needed to be tore down were 10 by 10 metal sheds that were purchased from Sears. I know that because I've lived on this street my whole life. The only person to gather on this property was a squatter that the previous owner allowed to occupy the property, and he lived in a camper for a few months. Claiming that local kids gather on this property is nonsense. Answer 2. Have you read this nonsense? This answer? If these people can't get English on the paper any better than this, how can we expect them to competently manage an apartment complex? Answer 3. It is not appropriate to relieve other areas of overservice, and that's a quote in the answer, and bring the overservice to Nichols Lane. It has been established over and over the water, sewer, and road will not support this project. Page 30, question 7. Please take a look at that sentence. I don't believe these people can build or manage an apartment complex. Page 36. The condition in this aerial photo is outdated, and the issue in the photo has not existed for several years. This is not the condition the applicant is implying he will remedy with this project. If you'll bear with me, I'm almost finished. The assessor's office lists the owners of this property as 1770 Nichols Lane, LLC. The Nevada Secretary of State lists no such entity. The assessor's office lists a South Lake Tahoe address for 1770 Nichols Lane, LLC. The California Secretary of State has no listing for 1770 Nichols Lane, LLC. The Colorado Secretary of State does have a listing for Nichols Lane, LLC, with an Arizona address. The Arizona Secretary of State has no listing for 1770 Nichols Lane, LLC. None of the names connected to the Colorado listing show up at any of the mentioned Secretaries of State. Who are these people? I think we should know who we're dealing with before we give these people a special use permit. Again, I do not oppose any good development. You're not hearing me say, do not build an apartment complex across the street from me. I'm saying this project doesn't pass a smell test. It does not, in my opinion, measure up to the kind of development we want in our community. This 56 pages is full of lies, false statements, and misleading commentary meant to secure a special use permit the applicant does not qualify for, nor are they worthy of. I ask you to deny this application. If you do find it appropriate to approve this application, I ask you to consider a few requests. Please require as a condition that the signage be attached to the building as it is depicted on page 24. Please specifically disallow any monument, unattached, or protruding signage. This is a condition you did agree to the last time that this project was approved. And again, if you could remove condition 28, which it sounds like you've already determined you will. Thank you for your time and attention. And I would take any questions if there are any.
Have any questions? Thank you.
I have copies of this I'll give to staff and yourselves.
You wanted to comment as well, sir? You wanted to come forward and comment, please?
My name is Robert Woodruff. I own 2880 Highway 50 East. I share the west fence with this new development. And excuse my unpreparedness, one of my tenants' kids got a hold of your notices, and I just got it like 3 days ago. But anyway, my major concerns is because it's a two-story, tenants of this apartment throwing stuff onto my property, and as I heard discussed here, they're talking about moving even closer to my fence, which is a shared fence, to the west, number one. And number two, was drainage. You know, if you're going to have drainage to where it drains to an outlet that goes to the sewer and not onto my property through the fence, because we are kind of low. And number three was, were they going to build a better, excuse me, I got a cold, I can't hardly breathe, a better, higher fence, because there has been, and we've stopped it now, having people that come off of Nichols. My property is a shortcut to AM/PM, to El Centro Market. Are they going to close that off so that, you know, folks can't use me as a shortcut anymore? Because my tenants were very quiet, peaceful, and I don't need a lot of foot traffic going through my property. Excuse me. But those are my comments, and hopefully you guys will consider that in your thoughts. Otherwise, I'm not opposed to improvement.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments? So, state your name, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, Jerry Goodman. I do live in South Lake Tahoe. My wife and I, we've been there for 55 years. Just to leave this gentleman back here, I understand maybe he doesn't want it in his backyard. I don't know how that works down here, but it'll be a good project. And as far as the names and the LLC, I did a 1031 tax exchange, and maybe that's why he doesn't have the right names or something. But it should be a good project. Thank you. My wife and I are the owners. That's
Great. Thank you, sir. Any other comments? We'll bring it back to commission. Any comments or questions?
I have a question for staff.
Commissioner Eswine.
Would there be a requirement for perimeter fencing on the north, south, and west sides?
There's a requirement for perimeter fencing along the north property line because you're adjacent to single family. The others do not have that requirement.
Okay, but it would be within our purview to require a fence along the west boundary.
If in your review of the findings, you found that to be necessary to make the required findings, you could include that.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Tingle?
Yes, I have a slight bit of concern about the 20-foot street width. I have a kind of a concern that is a little bit of a narrow stretch of road, and to develop a apartment complex which would increase traffic on that particular stretch with only a 20-foot wide street. I'm not sure whether I could support that. It seems to me that would be a little bit of an issue for traffic flow, but that's just my thought.
Stowell?
Just to follow up on the fencing question. Fencing is not required on, you've got residential on the north, which is where proposed solid fencing is shown on the site plan, but you're saying no fencing is needed on the west side. There's going to be fencing with the private yards, but you're saying no fencing is required but there is residential on the west side, right?
I think the issue is a single-family residential
Versus mobile homes?
Yeah.
So then I would, if Commissioner Eswine, to his point, I would definitely put that as part of recommend maybe as part of the motion, the fencing on the west side.
If I can clarify, sorry. To the north, the zoning is mobile home 12. To the west, the zoning is general commercial. So it's the zoning that's dictating the necessity, not the use.
But there is residential on the west.
Correct.
Right.
When I talk about the requirements, the zoning that dictates the requirement but you're right. If you look at the findings and it's necessary per the findings, you could include it.
Okay, thanks.
Well, in number 17, Nichols Lane must be improved with permanent all-weather surface, so that road will be changed, right, from there all the way down to 50, correct?
Yeah, it'll be paved all the way from the north end of the property line down south to where it meets existing pavement.
So the material that's there now is irrelevant because it'll be paved when this project goes in and actually improved.
Yes.
I guess I'd also like to point out that in terms of the potential increase in traffic, that any use that goes in there is going to increase the traffic. And the suggestion that it be used for parking is, I mean, that's a use that's going to automatically generate traffic. So I think that I understand everybody's concerns, but I think that it would be somewhat disingenuous for us to renege on a approval that we had already made.
Correct. Commissioner Tingle?
I understand that the traffic would be increased, but if it was a commercial development that Mr. White was suggesting, rather than a residential, the traffic would be somewhat less than if you had 16 cars, which if you have to have two parking spaces per apartment unit, and you're talking that kind of traffic in and out of there, I believe that would be a little bit less traffic on a commercial building than on a residential, but that's, like I said, just my thought on it. And as far as the fencing goes, would it be an 8-foot fence? Would that have to be a special use permit to put in the 8-foot fence? I believe we dealt with that with the last meeting that we had. I know 6 foot is standard, but if the property owner to the west was concerned about debris being tossed over onto his property, would an 8-foot fence then be requested?
But I think the 6-foot fence would cure also the problem of people cutting through there. If there's a fence there,
If the commission felt it was necessary to have an 8-foot fence, that could be accommodated without a special use permit, but would require a building permit. The reason is we're in a non-residential zoning district with 0 setbacks. So what you can think about in terms of fencing is a fence not to exceed 6 feet is allowed to encroach into a setback. Since this has a setback of 0, there's not an encroachment issue. So that's the subtle difference.
Mr. Borders?
Yeah, the two issues we're stumbling over right now is with the western property, with the design of the parking lot and the trash receptacle and the electrical box. There's virtually no way anybody in this lot, once it's constructed, can drive through and get to that property anyway. So, and as far as trash is concerned, there's only units 2, 4, and 8 that are abutted to that property, and there's no exits on that side, and there's just a couple of windows. So I could see we could ask to put a fence up, but I don't see that it's necessary to do that. Because the concern is it's a vacant lot now. People are going to cut through it to get to his property to use his driveway. Once this is constructed, people can't cut through there.
I thought his concern was the foot traffic going between Nichols Lane and the adjacent property.
Well, a small fence would do that, but it's not.
That's why I said a 6-foot fence would handle that as well. That foot traffic was the main concern, one of the main concerns. Anyone else?
The 20-foot road in there, it's unfortunate, but we are stuck with it. It's certainly not going to be any wider than a 20-foot road in the future. It is certainly passable as far as the number of units are concerned, or the number of parcels that are concerned. The Baja highway was 21 feet wide. Certainly not what we would expect, but that was a highway with trucks on both sides. This is 20 feet wide. It's unfortunate. It's not what we normally have, but we're not going to change it because it's been there for many, many years.
Could I comment on the fence, or is that appropriate?
It's up to the chair.
Go ahead, sir.
We were planning on constructing a fence on that west property line. We were looking more into a chain link screen fence. I don't know if that will help the applicant or not, but we didn't want outside traffic. I didn't know about the foot traffic. Some of the other information that was on the deal we obtained from the prior owners. We haven't been under contract on this property all that long, so some of those statements were based from the prior owner of their observation. So I hope I didn't offend anybody in any of that. So, all right.
Clarifying that. Okay, bring it back for further discussion or a motion, or?
Well, I'd like to word some, some changes to
Please.
potential conditions.
And then we'll see if the applicant will accept it.
Yeah. I'd like to add a condition that the signage be attached to the building and that there be no monument signage attached or associated with this project. That the proposed fence along the north boundary be continued along the west boundary. And I think that was it.
You're going to delete 28?
And delete 28.
And delete 28.
Right.
Mr. Chair, did that include
And the
to
wording
Commissioner?
changes that you
Yeah,
made.
to
on the
23.
Yeah, number 23 and number 30.
30, correct. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
By simply saying that we're going to continue the fence, we're not specifying what material either one of those fences are.
No,
Well,
it says
okay.
on the plan solid fence.
Yes.
Yeah, but if you decide on the western side to put in a chain link fence,
There's already a chain link fence. I would say solid, like it's shown on the plans.
okay.
The plan shows the north. The plan shows a solid fence on the north side, which is why I said a continuation of the north side
Okay, so
fence.
you're saying that the continuation of the solid fence all the way down?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With your permission, could I make a comment?
I guess so, sir. The other gentleman to make one?
All right, thank you. My property on the west side already has a fence there. Now, are we talking about using my existing fence or putting a gap fence in there or something so people can't jump it, or what are we discussing?
I think what he
now?
was saying is that the north fence will be a solid fence all the way down that side as well.
Oh, okay, on the other side of mine. Oh,
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for clearing that for me.
Certainly, sir. Would the applicant step forward again, please?
I don't have a problem meeting with the
Well, could you, we need to come forward and there's been quite a few changes, et cetera. And are you clear on those as far as?
I'm all clear. On the fencing, we were trying to process when we have to put fencing in and do a chain link with a screen. It just, everything we try to do with least metal maintenance. Wood fences need to be painted. They fall apart. There's parts that I believe I have to ask the owner there. On your side of the west, there is a chain link fence almost all the way across. I'm not sure where the kids are coming in and out of that.
They're coming in between my solid wood fence and the convalescent center. There's a gap in there of about 4 feet with a little chain link gate in it, is where they're coming through.
Is that on our property or is it on the convalescent? I can't speak for something if
I
they're.
don't know where your property line is right there, but they have that little chain link, and then you guys have like a barbed wire little fence on the other side, the northern side of that. Used to be. I don't know what you.
My question would be, if you had a solid fence on the north side, why would it be a problem to continue it down the other side?
There's not a problem.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Second?
Commissioner Stowell.
I would like to second the motion.
Well, I don't think we've made the motion yet.
I know, I thought you made the motion.
I was just clarifying. Okay, I'd like to make a motion.
Commissioner Essman, please.
I move to approve SUP-17-116, a special use permit request to allow an 8-unit apartment building on property zone, general commercial, located at 1770 Nichols Lane, APN 2018-161-11, based on the findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval in the staff report as modified by the discussion this evening.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Mr. Stillwell, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
It carries 5-1. All right, for F2, VAR-17-112, for possible action to consider a request for variance from Helen and Stan Robinson, property owners Helen Denise Kendrick, to reduce the rear setback from 30 feet to 20 feet on property zone single-family 1 acre located at 97 Dean Court, APN 008-095-09.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hope Sullivan, Planning Manager. The subject property is a third of an acre, but it's in the SF 1 acre zoning district. I have on the screen the zoning for you, which kind of shows you the situation. There's 6 lots on Dean Court, which is a cul-de-sac. These were the subject of a variance in 1991 that allowed for lot sizes ranging from 13,740 square feet to 19,259 square feet. Again, but the base zoning stayed SF1A, so you would expect when you see SF1A to see 1 acre. If we look across the street, and I'll bring the cursor on it, this is what an acre is. So you can see what we're working with is a third of an acre. The largest lots on the Dean Court isn't even half an acre. As part of the variance, they also modified the setbacks for 4 of the parcels, including the subject parcel. 2 of the parcels had a drainage easement, and so they were subject to different requirements. The subject parcel modification of setbacks was a front setback of 20, a side setback of 10, street side of 15, and a rear setback of 30. The rear setback here is adjacent to the SF6 zoning. The 30-foot rear setback is identical to the setback in the SF1A, or where you would have 1 acre parcels. As I mentioned, the zoning to the south, which would be adjacent to the proposed shop location, is the SF6000, where the rear setback is 10 feet. The building height proposed is actually 18 feet. I think the staff report said 14 feet, but that was to the beginning of the roof, so it will actually be 18 feet. So this is just sort of an oddball. It's just weird that we have these tiny lots, but still zoned SF1A and utilizing the rear setback of the SF1A. So the staff has reviewed the 3 findings for the variance, and we have been able to find them in the affirmative. I do have up for you the drawing the applicant presented, which shows their site plan. The staff is recommending this for approval. There are some conditions, and the Robertsons are present, and I'm happy to answer questions, but this is just a property that's already been subject to variances, which is how the lot got created a third of an acre, which has created a bit of a hardship when you're considering the 30-foot rear setback.
And like you mentioned in the discussion, it's more like the single-family 12,000, which is a 20-foot setback, correct? Thank you. Commissioner Eschwein.
Why wouldn't we just rezone all of these properties so we didn't have to go through a variance every time somebody wanted to do something on them? Well, I guess I'd like an answer. You know, the city can, on their own initiative, undertake a rezoning.
It would help 6 different parcels.
Yeah.
Noted.
Any other questions of staff? Would the applicant like to come forward, please?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and the Planning Commission. We appreciate your time tonight. For the record, my name is Helen Kendrick Robertson, also known as Helen Denise Kendrick on the title, and this is my husband, Stan.
You've seen the conditions oops, I thought I just turned it on. You've seen the conditions and you accept those, all the conditions of approval?
Yes.
Thank you. You want to add anything to what staff has said or make any comments?
That was my first question, is why couldn't we rezone it? She said it would just cost too much, so that's why we're going for a variance.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission for the applicant? No, seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll bring up any questions or comments from the audience. Public comments. Seeing none, I'll bring it back for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner,
I move that we approve variance 17-112, a variance request to reduce the required rear yard setback from 30 to 20 feet on assessor's parcel number 008-09509 in single-family 1-acre zoning based on the findings and subject to the recommended conditions for approval in the staff report.
we have a motion, we have a
I'll
second.
second it.
Commissioner Salerno seconds it. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That was easy. Okay, F3, SUP-16-078 for possible action, review of a special use permit for Maverick Incorporated, property owner Maverick Incorporated, on a freeway-oriented signs, 6 months after completion of the installation of the sign on 3/20/17, as required per SUP-16-078 on property zone limited industrial located at 1451 College Parkway, APN 008-922-30.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hope Sullivan, Planning Manager. The purpose of this item is to give the commission an opportunity to review the approval you made that got installed 6 months ago so that you can discuss among yourselves the success or shortcomings, if you will, of the project. The two specific areas you're looking at is the electronic message display, and you also had a condition that the improvements that complement the art installation along the freeway would also be reviewed. So I'm not going to say a whole lot more than that, but here is a picture of the sign. And here's a picture of the artwork that was installed at the base of the sign to complement the artwork along the freeway. And Paul Hayward with Maverick has come to the meeting today to hear your thoughts as well. And again, this is not for action, it's for discussion only. Thank you.
Any questions for staff? Ms. Stoll.
I assume the artwork came first before the other way.
Now, what happened in this case is I believe they were just shy of the 3-acre minimum, if I remember correctly. He's nodding, so I am remembering correctly. And so what the code says in the case of freeway signs is that the commission has the ability to give flexibility on the standards, and there has to be sort of a redeeming architectural style or something like that to justify it. And so it seemed like with this being at the exit of the freeway and so close to the freeway, if they could somehow incorporate the freeway art into the sign, that would be sort of the mitigation for having the lot smaller than the 3-acre minimum.
It just seems awkward because the artwork is fenced in with a chain link fence, and I would just think nothing to do with the sign itself, but that maybe it would be a better situation to move that artwork somewhere else. As opposed to all the other artwork that's along the freeway, it really doesn't serve its purpose, I don't think.
Well, it does go with the mining theme that comes out from underneath where you come out off the freeway. So that's what's underneath there is the train and the miners and the cart and everything else. It's just down from that. Any other comments? Or?
I walk my dog in that area probably 8 times a week. And that sign definitely catches your eye from a long distance away. And I like the artwork, but I do agree with Commissioner Stoll that perhaps it would have been better served outside of that chain link fence than inside of that chain link fence. There's some planter area where there's some shrubs and grasses that it might have worked better on the other side of that fence.
I'm not sure if that's within their property or not, but also the fact that there's a lot of foot traffic by there possibly to worry about damage or graffiti or something, yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I may, the point's well taken. The fencing's based on the NDOT right-of-way, and the mitigation had to be on private property. We weren't going to be able to work this through with NDOT. But maybe it's not a good idea in cases like this because of the chain link fence compromising the aesthetic.
Anyone else? Mr. Eschwan.
I just, as much as I dislike these types of signs, I think that they've met the condition and have made an attempt to keep it as aesthetically pleasing as possible.
I agree.
I would love to. Paul Haywood with Maverick. It's a very rare opportunity that I get to address a council such as yourself after a project. And I just wanted to, this is, of course, just a small portion of the project that we did. We expanded the dispensers behind us and then also added the light on the corner. Right. And as we've gone and reviewed this, it was a little bit of an expensive project for us, but it absolutely was the best thing for the site. We're able to move larger vehicles to the rear and get the safety on our site much better, and the light creates amazing traffic patterns and eliminates some of the dangers that were there before. But I mainly wanted to just express my gratefulness for your staff and for the opportunity to work with them. We, as you know, we are in your city for the long haul. We have several other projects and those types of things. In fact, we were blessed to open a new Reno store just today. In fact, the opening is going on right now. But with all of this, I get very little opportunity to come back and thank you for the processes that you have in place and for the amazing people that you have to work with. They, by any means, did not give us anything. It was really a fun process, but that process absolutely made the best project possible here in this situation. And I just wanted to express my appreciation for that.
And I think originally, if I remember, you wanted something quite a bit larger, et cetera.
We did, yes.
This seems to have worked out well for you.
It does. It was a great compromise, and we absolutely appreciate it.
Oh, we appreciate your cooperation.
Thank you.
And I have to say that I truly do appreciate that traffic light.
Excellent.
Because it was a challenge getting across College Parkway, walking my dog. And so with that traffic light, I am able to do it with a little less stress.
Excellent. Good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. H, staff reports.
Good evening. Just a couple things to report on. Items that have been before the Planning Commission and went to the board. We've just had an update on the marijuana ordinances. We had the first reading go to the Board of Supervisors again in September, both for the Title 18 zoning and the business license to charge the fees, and they'll be going for second reading on October 5th for anybody interested in watching that. Again, I think I mentioned this last time, but the Board of Supervisors eliminated any even distributors from the limited industrial area, so they're farther away from, any sort of business would be farther away from residential areas. For next month, we have 2 special use permits, one for a guest building to convert existing detached space into a guest building unit, and a special use permit actually to convert offices to multifamily residential on Washington Street.
SUP for expansion.
Oh, we have we do, that's right. We have another SUP for an expansion of a non-conforming use in the historic district, and that's related to again, it's another existing multifamily, but just expanding the area of it on an existing parcel. We're also going to try to get on the agenda a couple of the NRS consistency ordinances that are related to the recent legislature. We'll work with our deputy district attorney on that, but to get a recommendation from you before taking them to the board. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have the thing coming up next week, I believe, the conference, and you were going to highlight or recommend possibly some ideas for us as to what to attend or whatever.
I'll do that. That's a good idea. And I just got an updated schedule today from them, so I'll go over that and highlight some things that I'm, just so you're welcome to go whatever you want, but if there's some that would be helpful, like specific planning commissioner or just legal, local interest, I'll highlight some things, but you're certainly welcome to look at the schedule and go to whatever interests you.
Thank you. Any commissioners' reports or comments? Seeing none. Oh.
Just after the discussion at the last meeting about accessory dwelling units, I then realized that there's actually a specific action in the master plan. Goal 2.2, expand housing variety. 2.2C is include appropriate standards for permitting and construction of attached or detached accessory dwelling units. So I'm glad it's there to be implemented at some future date.
It was there when we adopted our current ordinance too, and just the way it is as far as we got at that time. So.
Other comments? I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. We're adjourned.